Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 347. Today we're going to talk about the Mountains of Madness expansion for Eldritch Horror. This is the second expansion and is the first big box expansion. As you might have guessed, it takes place in Antarctica and it adds quite a bit to the game. Let's just go ahead and jump right in and we'll take a look at some of the new features and then I'll come back and tell you what I think. So as I said, the Mountains of Madness adds Antarctica, but it also adds some new characters and new monsters, new conditions and spells and everything to go along with this new location. The most notable addition is the Antarctica Board itself. And this provides 6 new locations for players to visit. You can see here is the Miskatonic Outpost, and players can move freely from the Antarctica space on the main board to the Miskatonic Outpost without spending an action, but they can only make that trip once per turn. And one thing you can notice if you look at the Miskatonic Outpost location is it has what's called a local action. So each of the spaces on this board has an action that the players can do on their turn. For example, this one allows you to gain 1 ship ticket or test your influence. If you pass, you can gain 1 Antarctic Guide unique asset, and I'll explain the unique assets a little bit later. A couple other locations of note, we've got the City of the Elder Things. Here we can test our observation. If we pass, we can straight up gain a clue or spend a clue to gain an artifact. But it is tricky to get out to this distance, but this is a cool spot to go and visit. And speaking of distance, we've got the Plateau Alain. Here we can take a local action, test our lore, or we can spend a clue. And if we do that, we can move to any space of your choice containing a gate. So it's a quick way to kind of jump out and get back onto the main board for some action. There's 2 new old ones in the set. There's Ithaquah and Rise of the Elder Things. Ithaquah is kind of a glorified Sasquatch, kind of like a Bigfoot, but definitely has some otherworldly powers. You're going to be dealing a lot with frostbite when you deal with this particular baddie. And we've also got the Rise of the Elder Things. And this one comes with some special encounters, but you can also see here, this says set up the Antarctic side of the board. Now you're not always going to use the Antarctic board just because you've got the expansion. You can if you want, but one of the options is to shuffle up these prelude cards and randomly draw one, and these will outline a kind of scenario and give you a little bit of background information in terms of what you're trying to solve. Now you could of course choose these specifically if you wanted. You could do these randomly. You can mix and match different old ones. A lot of these prelude cards will change how they work based on the old one that you've chosen. Next we can see we've got 8 new characters, and that's nice because it fleshes out and adds some more variety to the different characters that players can use in the game. And of course they come with their cool looking standees. And it should also be noted that there are location encounters that match the different locations on the Antarctica board. In addition to those, there are a few cards that go with the locations that came with the base set. And everything is marked with this little Elder Thing icon at the bottom, whether it's characters or cards. And a lot of these new location encounters are going to have a direct link to a lot of the other new materials. For example, this particular location encounter might trigger this hunted condition, and this is a new condition in the set. And it works just like the other conditions. You'll have to do some kind of action, or it will affect some kind of action, and then when the little comet icon shows up on the Mythos cards, you'll probably have to do some tests. There's 2 other special encounter decks dealing directly with the Antarctica location itself. First, we've got the Research Encounter deck, and you can see these are specific to Antarctica. So anytime you encounter a clue on Antarctica, instead of drawing a card from the old one deck, you'll draw it from this specific deck. And again, these will check which location you're at, and the encounter will gear itself towards that. But these can go away to advancing the mystery that you're trying to solve, no matter what the old one is that you're encountering. And we've also got this adventure deck targeted towards Antarctica. I'll talk more about those in a second. Next, we've got a couple new expedition encounters, and these are for new locations on the old board that did not have expedition encounters for them before. Here we can see Rome, and here we can see Sydney. Next, I saved the best for last, and these are the unique asset cards. These are just like regular assets, except they're almost like conditions as well. You can see here is a Purifying the World unique asset. This is actually a task, and it says, when you defeat a non-epic monster during a combat encounter, place the monster on this card, and then you may flip this card. You don't have to flip it, but you can if you want. Now, I've covered up the back here because I don't want to spoil it. But needless to say, the number of monsters that you've placed on this card when you decide to flip it is going to cause a different effect. And there's a good variety of these unique asset cards, and they really tie the game together in a lot of ways. You might get different tasks, you might meet different individuals or have different weapons and things that have a consequence or some sort of like almost like a mini quest, if you will, in there. And a lot of them are tied directly to Antarctica. And that's really what this expansion does to me, is it really glues sort of the narrative together. Now you've got, for example, the encounter decks, the research deck, where if you're in Antarctica, you're going to research something to do with the location that you're currently at. And that's very cool because one of the, and I wouldn't really call it a complaint, because in my original review of the base game, one thing that I said was, and it's kind of changed and it's continued to change as we played the game more, is you kind of feel like on a roller coaster. You kind of feel like, oh, you know, you're flipping cards a little bit and things are just kind of happening. There's not really a tight thread weaving through all of the different encounters that you're having. But what, like I said in the original review, was as I revisited the game more and more, it felt like it started to tighten up a little bit. I was investigating this world, dropping in and out. It was something that was kind of always going on. Even after I packed the game away, I kind of come back to it and there's just crazy stuff happening. And I'm sort of dipping in and out of that, taking a look at the narrative, and actually kind of goes with the Lovecraftian theme, which is interesting. But this really ties it together and kind of grounds it a little bit more. I mean, it adds new cards, it adds all kinds of cool, fun things like the last unique asset I showed you. But what it really does is it really seeps in and you start to get to know the world a little bit. It feels like there's a little bit more of a plot and less randomness, because everything is kind of specific to what you're doing, and it's the real kind of consequence to things. The unique assets has that really, the interesting part of that, like, okay, I'm here, I had a little adventure in Arkham, that gave me this guy who told me to actually go over here, and that's going to interact with, you know, maybe the mystery or some of the clues on the board in a little bit more interesting way, because it ties back to, you know, whatever the original thing that I did, maybe just some random location encounter that I experienced on the second turn of the game, and that still is having an outcome later on in the game. Whereas before it was kind of flip it, okay, I improved my willpower or something, or I got a cool item, but you kind of forgot about that encounter, whereas the memory, it kind of lingers on a little bit of that. And I think that's really the main point of the game. I mean, even starting from the prelude cards, you've got a little bit of backstory, a little bit of setup, and it's great, it's fun. It doesn't really add anything to the game to make it actually longer or much different or unfamiliar, but it just kind of firms up and you know, kind of cements what the game was already doing. The only other thing that I would say is this kind of a wishful thing is, I think that would be cool if they could do it without adding a new board. And I love this new board. I'm glad it's here. I like how there's actions on the spaces, and it's an otherworldly place. You know, Antarctica is really an alien environment. But let's say you took like North America, or somehow focused some more to do with the location and not necessarily the old one. Because like you said, you can do the investigation, the research on Antarctica, and that's going to tie into the old one. It's going to tie into the rest of the cards. So that sort of combined whole is going to make more narrative sense. And I'd like to see them revisit places already on the main board with some of these, so you can say, oh, we were going between Tokyo and Arkham and back and forth. Now it's back to Tokyo. Now it's over to London. Oh, now it's back to Tokyo again. So you could kind of see them add these style of cards to the game and kind of firm up that narrative even more. So I think it's great. I mean, it's not one of those, you know, you come to at the end of the day, if you're a new player to the game, you say, is this essential? I would say no. It might even be slightly overwhelming, but it's something that you could get into in stages, and that's just how I've gotten into it, because I got into the game, you know, when it was first released. So now it's very natural and easy to have added all of these extra components. So anyway, I think it's great, and I'm scared because, you know, everything actually all fits in one box, which is, storage is a concern of mine. So there's still room probably for a few more cards. I'll probably end up having to keep 2 boxes, but my concern is that they just keep adding boards and stuff. So that's just a storage concern. They can do whatever they want in that regard, honestly. But it would be cool to see some of these techniques kind of reinvested back into the game without having to have, like, you know, 8 boards on the table and 58 decks, you know, of cards versus the 25 decks of cards that are already there. You know, those decks can all get a little bit thicker. Again, the distribution, the randomness, and the probability of having, you know, intricate narratives is less because it's, you know, you dilute the decks a little bit. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on the game. It definitely is, I think, a must-buy if you enjoy Eldritch Horror, of course. You're probably just watching this review to see what I think about it. You already have the game. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. It remains fun, and it really, like I said, firms everything up. So, thanks.